Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and visit with you today. Being a 3-degree Aggie, I have to, when I think about football, I don't think about the current football. I think about the 80s football whenever I was in school. It was a little better. We had a little bit better run against LSU. Now, y'all are just toying with us, I think. So I'm gonna get into this discussion, and one of the things that you're going to hear me very, very blunt. I don't have what reputation I have is that I don't sugarcoat anything, and I'm very straightforward with my answer. So you ask me a question, you're going to get Joe's answer as I know it, and I don't try to keep people from getting their feelings hurt. So just be a little bit wary about that. With regard to these groups. I need to give you a little bit of perspective. This is my 6th Farm Bill. I started on this stuff back in 1986, and I've been working on it for quite some time. Nothing happens in a Farm Bill or in Washington anymore that surprises me. It's somewhere where I go many times a year, and then Farm Bill year. I'm there more than at home a lot of times, and so I work very closely with the staffs up there. A lot of people say, why do you work with the staff? Why don't you work with the members? Well, the staff educate the members, and that's the way you do things. You can get a little bit more time with the staff. So with regard to some of these proposals, I need to tell you a little bit about what we do. This picture shows you, and Jack is right, we work with producers all across the country. You have these little pictures that look like dogs. They're actually cows, supposedly cows. But we work with different types of farmers all across the country because that gives us perspective on how farming is done everywhere. You're not going to notice any sugar because we've never been asked to work with sugarcane growers, but we certainly could. We've done it in other types of things. One of the things that happens over time, and I'm just quickly going to go through this. Tell you a quick story. When I first started going to Washington, D.C., I was the pack mule. I was the student that carried the boxes of papers. And I noticed really quickly, because I was the guy carrying the heavy boxes, that the staff really wouldn't, they'd take them and they'd just kind of set them down. And you never really had them looking at them very much because we had about 1 billion numbers in them. As good economists, we were trying to impress everybody with how much numbers we could generate. And the fact of the matter is, when I took over doing this work, the very first thing I did was change to colors. And it's not, and I don't want to be insulting, but basically the members they don't know economics. But they know if something's red and I tell them red's bad, then they can see that pretty quickly that there's a lot of red out there. If I tell them green is pretty good, that's a pretty good situation. So this is kind of a picture that I would take to Washington. Actually, we took it in December and said, look, best case scenario, we extend this bill, the policies in this bill out. We didn't help everybody. Everybody's not rich. These are the best of the best farmers from all across the country, and we haven't fixed the problem. So every time some of these groups, and this is the transition, every time some of these groups I'm about to be talking about talk about how we have a bunch of rich farmers or well taken care of farmers, or the farmers make more money than your average citizen, it is something that really irritates me, because the fact of the matter is we're not making people whole with farm policy. We're filling the gaps whenever Mother Nature or the prices take advantage of situations. We're not making anybody rich, and that's the problem. Why are we starting to see more and more attacks on crop insurance? Because crop insurance has started garnering a bigger portion of the government dollar. Commodity payments in general have gone down over time. More recently, they peaked up a little bit with these low prices, but basically you saw a lot. I'm going to talk about it in just a few seconds. There's a lot of people focusing on crop insurance because that's where the majority of the money is. It looks like it's going to be spent. All right, I will talk for hours in most cases and talk about these groups with never saying their name, because I do not want to give them any press. But today I'm going to say their names because basically I hope you understand, if you give money to these organizations, what you're giving to. First, I'm going to talk to you about a report that was done in 2016 called Farms and Free Enterprise by the Heritage Foundation. In this publication, you're going to see, I just popped it up, they say a lot of stuff about sugar, a lot of stuff that's negative about sugar. In fact, this group is one of the probably your worst opponent in Washington, D.C. in terms of all these think tanks. There's another group, R Street. They do a lot of analysis. They didn't say anything about sugar in their recent publication, which is good. They tax some of the other programs I work on all the time, but they didn't say anything about sugar. American Enterprise Institute hired a number of economists. One of them used to be the chief economist of U.S. Department of Agriculture, the second name on this list. Why they hire these big names? Because they're supposed to, it carries prestige. What do they think about sugar? They don't think very much at all about sugar. If you read anything on this graph, if you can see the little print, I'm going to read it to you. The red part, the U.S. sugar program encourages beet and cane operations to expand production in ways that waste resources and increase the prices consumers pay for many food products. You know what? I'm going to say this once, and I'm going to say it about 3 times. There is some truth to everything these people write, but they twist it. There's always a twist there that is very forthright, in my opinion. And more and more, I'm going to show you examples. Here, if you want, I don't have the time to do it, but basically we could go through and look at some of the things they say about the sugar program. And while there's some truth, there's a lot of things that are not true. In November of last year, Environmental Working Group, which generally tended to be for a long time, was public enemy number one with producers, because they're the ones that put out the database of how much producers were receiving from the government. The fact of the matter is these people are being more reasonable. When I say that, that's saying a lot. I'm going to tell you right now. These people are being more reasonable about what they're thinking. Well, how did I say that? It's fair to ask taxpayers to help out farm households that are truly suffering. That is a rational statement. Now, the rest of that paragraph is terrible, but the first part is actually most people would agree with. And the fact of the matter, a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have expected that out of the Environmental Working Group. But nothing about sugar in that particular publication. Now, Heritage Foundation came out with a big publication, Blueprint for Balance of Federal Budget for 2018. Well, you can see as I lined out down here at the bottom, they're on page 25, they talk about eliminating the sugar program as one of the things that needs to happen. The best thing for you in all of things that I'm going to talk about today is when they had to write that sentence that I underlined right there, I know it gave them grief. Because of the fact that this proposal has no savings is the thing that most of the people in Washington are basically paying attention to now. Why would you cut a program if there's not going to be any savings to it? And so it's one of the things that I think, obviously, this industry has going for it. In particular, the study that we were asked to analyze was one that was done back in 2016 by the same guy that's written most of the other things for Heritage. But he had some very clear proposals. Gilliland and Brandon did a really nice job on their components. Ours hasn't come out yet, basically, because I've been dragging my feet. One of the things that they do is they go out, these groups, all of them they've gone out and hired, in my profession, what would be relatively big name economists to work for them. And that's supposedly going to bring a lot more prestige to the reports. The fact of the matter is let's just say I hope they keep hiring the same people. So I want to say this, and if I get quoted at anything on today's publication, I want it to be this, because I want the authors to know that there are people that are out there watching what they write. What I have in red here is the single dumbest thing I've seen in my 31 years of doing this stuff. And it was the conclusion from the report, which says, I'm going to read it to you if you can't see that far. Moving away from subsidies will free up agricultural producers to better use their ingenuity and expertise to achieve even greater success. There's nothing about that sentence that makes any sense to an economist. If you take away the safety net, it is not going to make you use more ingenuity. It's going to make you broke. These are the types of things that I have to work with the committee staff and help them understand and help them educate other staffers to understand. They use in their report, they use this debt to asset ratio as one of many things that shows you that agriculture is in a great position. And you know what? It's like everything else. There's some truth to this. We are better than the 80s, which was the worst time since the Depression. Yes. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at producers that actually generate and produce a lot of production, the ones that actually matter in this country, those debt levels are high and they're going up. So when people want to use a half-truth, you say the average data says this. Well, guess what? The average data has 2.1 million farms in it. Y'all are in it, many of you are in it, and I'm in that 2.1 million farms. I got to tell you, my little cow operation doesn't really provide the family food. It's that university job. But I'm in USDA's data set because I do have an operation. The question is, should people like myself that account for 85% of all producers, these guys that use these numbers and twist them, 2.1 million farmers, average debt's 12%, that's fine. There's a whole lot of people in there like myself that don't have any debt. Is that realistic for agriculture? No. What is realistic is you look at the rest of the people that have sales anywhere over 250,000, that is only 329,000 farms in this country. That's if you want to really get in and start attacking things, you really need to be more truthful about what they're doing, using numbers that they know, I think they know better than, to try to attack you all is something that's not very good. What they wanted to specifically look at is eliminate Title I. For those of you that don't worry about the Farm Bill, Title I is commodity programs. That is your ARC PLC, the loan, just little things like that. That would be devastating. The second part of that proposal is eliminate revenue-based policies. I'm going to show you a graph why when you say that you're going to eliminate revenue-based policies, that's kind of a big deal these days. And then the third part of that is if you don't want to let anybody buy up over 70% coverage. There is not a farmer in this room that can make a living and stay in business buying 70% coverage. Why? Because you've had to absorb a 30% loss before you get a payment. That's very, very difficult. So why did they attack revenue protection? Well, because based on the orange part of these graphs, it's the biggest part we have. They didn't say they wanted to do away with it. They just said we want to do away with this one part. This is the part that people like to buy. That's how you do things if you want to cause problems. So our results, if you do away these three little things that they talked about that didn't sound like they would be any big deal for agriculture, if you do away with those, you're going to have a massive change in asset values across the country. When you reduce your assets, that little debt to asset ratio that we're talking about, you got your debt and you got a little smaller number of the assets, suddenly that thing's going to go way up and it's going to be much, much, much harder to get loans in agriculture. So just things to be aware of. The ARC and PLC that many of you wouldn't have any knowledge about because you're doing sugar. Basically, that's the safety net protection we have now, and that's all right. That was a test. I failed. So anyway, the main thing is in our report that's going to come out fairly soon, I think, it's going to do a big deal, a lot of damage, and a lot of damage to the parts of agriculture that has a lot of public support. When you start talking about devastating the U.S. Midwest, then you get a lot of people's attention. You talk about problems in the South, you get less people's attention. But the Midwest, there's going to be a lot of damage done to the Midwest if the proposals in that report were to go through. I want to just say briefly what I've been spending my time on. While at the same time, I've been having to read all these reports that say that agriculture is in such great shape we don't need to help people anymore. I've been spending all my time trying to figure out how to keep people in business across this country because farm conditions are really bad. And there's a whole lot of reports. You can read titles, but Tough Times in the Heartland. The Agricultural Lender Survey from Farmer Mac and American Bankers Association basically says things are dismal on the farm level. The Federal Reserve says there's things are really bad on the farm level that could be worse, but they're really bad. Kansas City Fed, farm economy softens further, but shows signs of stabilizing. When you have a lot of people leave, the farming business, the people that are there are in better shape, relatively speaking, right? So it's one of those things that a lot of people are not thinking about very much. I want to get to questions, so I'm going to jump to this. So I don't believe there's very much truth at all to these groups, and they spend an awful lot of time saying the only reason why they're kind of moving towards attacking agriculture is they're saying that conditions are good. And the fact of the matter is about 4 years or 5 years too late for that argument. Conditions are terrible. And so while they're writing things that say that conditions are great, it's a good time to cut. Myself and economists from all the southern states, including LSU, including Auburn, everybody got together, and we've been working on a publication about how could farmers weather this downturn that they're in by making business adjustments. So I just wanted to bring that point home, that there's people in Washington that are so far disconnected from how things are out in real life, and that's really the way it is on a lot of issues, not just this one. So when you start thinking about what's going to happen going forward, I do have a lot of, if you ask me a question about the policy stuff, I have a lot of opinions about that, and I would like for you to ask me those questions, or Jack. But I don't think these groups can acknowledge the downturn because it takes away their power in terms of asking for changes. So you won't see any of that. In fact, they argue against it pretty hard. What I think, if you read any of those publications, one of the things you're going to find is that they give the foreign producer more attention than you, meaning that they care more about them than your well-being. It comes through very clearly, and to me, that's not a very good way to be. And lastly, this isn't going to sound right. I say they're not going anywhere, which is a good thing, and the reality is, from my standpoint, it's a really good thing. They haven't been very good at their job, which is a good thing for this group. They have written the same thing over and over again. I can show you paragraphs that are basically the same across 3 reports. That's pretty good. They haven't gone out and got the best and the brightest, which is a lucky thing so far. I want to end with one of Heritage's own public graphics. And I want to ask you this question. If you look at that dollar bill, where did every dollar in spending go? Where do you think agriculture is at in that dollar? If you look to the right, the very far corner that usually gets snagged on the Coke machine as you're trying to roll it in there, at 3%. So Heritage is spending an awful lot of time and effort hiring people to do reports, paying consultants good money to do reports to attack what's a part of 3% of our spending. Why? Because we've been chosen to be easy pickings. Much more easy to go after than any of those things on that top line. And that's, the state of the world we're in. Is cutting part of 3% of that dollar going to balance the budget? Not even close. But if they keep attacking, and they're trying to win something small, when if they really would think about, and their investors who give them money would think about it, they need to be looking at other parts of that dollar, not in agriculture. So with that, I'm going to close. Here's my contact information if you need it. And I think we're prepared to take any questions you have. We do spend an awful lot of time, as Jack said. Last Farm Bill, our center did over 100 different analysis for the Farm Bill, for the Ag Committees of the House and Senate. This time, I'll tell you right now, we have been asked to do about 6 or 7, and that has largely to do with there's not a lot of money to make all these changes that people would like to see to make things better. And there's just a big, this Farm Bill I've written down a number of times, it's going to be 2014 Part 2, in my opinion. So with that, hopefully I gave you something to ask questions about.